What happens when Hollywood's most unpredictable actor meets late-night television's most controversial host? You won't believe what unfolds when Mark Wahlberg sits down with Jimmy Kimmel for what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview, only to witness one of the most explosive confrontations in talk show history. This isn't just another celebrity spat. This is a masterclass in how quickly things can spiral completely out of control when egos clash and old wounds are ripped wide open. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two powerhouses go head-to-head in what started as a simple interview, but quickly devolved into television chaos. The atmosphere in Studio 6A was electric as Mark Wahlberg made his entrance, the audience erupting in applause as he walked across the stage with that signature Boston swagger that made him a household name. Jimmy Kimmel, sporting his usual smug grin, stood up from behind his desk to greet his guest, but even the most casual observer could sense something was off from the very beginning. The handshake lasted a fraction too long, the smiles felt forced, and there was an unmistakable tension crackling in the air that the live audience couldn't quite put their finger on. Mark Wahlberg, everybody, Kimmel announced with his trademark enthusiasm, but his voice carried an edge that regular viewers of the show would recognize as his setup for controversy. Thanks for being here, Mark. I know you're incredibly busy, with your new movie, your various business ventures, and of course, your daily 4 a.m. workout routine that you never stop talking about. The dig was subtle but unmistakable, and Wahlberg's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly as he settled into the guest chair. "Thanks for having me, Jimmy," he replied, his Boston accent thick with barely contained irritation. Though I gotta say, for someone who makes jokes for a living, that workout comment wasn't exactly comedy gold. The audience laughed nervously, unsure whether they were witnessing playful banter or the opening shots of something more serious. Kimmel's smile widened, but his eyes remained cold as he shuffled through his note cards with theatrical precision. "Oh, come on, Mark. You know I'm just giving you a hard time. Besides, we both know you've got thicker skin than that, right? I mean, you'd have to, considering some of the movies you've been in." That comment hit like a sledgehammer, and Wahlberg's entire demeanor shifted. His relaxed posture straightened, his hands gripped the armrests of his chair, and his voice dropped to that dangerous register that anyone who'd seen him in his more intense roles would recognize. "You want to talk about my movies, Jimmy? Let's talk about them. Which one specifically are you having a problem with?" Kimmel leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the mounting tension. "Well, I mean, where do I even start? You've got quite the filmography there, Mark. Some real interesting choices over the years." He paused for dramatic effect, letting the silence hang in the air like a loaded weapon. "But hey, we all make mistakes, right? Some of us just make them in front of millions of people." The studio audience was completely silent now, the energy in the room shifting from anticipation to genuine discomfort. Wahlberg's publicist, sitting in the front row, was visibly squirming in her seat, clearly recognizing that this interview was veering dangerously off script. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every micro-expression, every subtle shift in body language that spoke volumes about the animosity brewing between these two men. "You know what, Jimmy?" Wahlberg said, his voice steady but loaded with menace. "I came here tonight to talk about my new project, to have a good time with your audience, maybe share a few laughs. But it seems like you've got some kind of agenda here that I'm not really understanding. So why don't you just cut to the chase and tell me what's really on your mind?" Kimmel's response was immediate and cutting. "What's on my mind? Well, since you asked so nicely, I've been thinking about authenticity lately. You know, what it means to be genuine in Hollywood, especially when you're trying to reinvent yourself for the public. It's fascinating how some people can just completely transform their image, don't you think?" The words hung in the air like a challenge, and everyone in the studio knew that this was no longer about movies or promotional tours or celebrity small talk. This was personal, and it was about to get much worse. Wahlberg's eyes narrowed as he processed the implication behind Kimmel's carefully chosen words, his hands slowly unclenching from the armrests as he prepared for whatever was coming next. "Authenticity," Wahlberg repeated slowly, tasting the word like it was poison. "That's rich coming from someone who built his entire career on making fun of other people's authentic moments. Tell me, Jimmy, when was the last time you were authentic about anything?" When was the last time you showed your audience who you really are instead of hiding behind your little jokes and your cute bits? The atmosphere in the studio had become suffocating. Kimmel's house band, usually ready with musical stings and sound effects, sat in stunned silence. The audience members were looking at each other with growing concern, realizing they were witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't the playful celebrity roasting they'd come to expect from late-night television. This was something much darker and more personal. Kimmel's mask of professional composure was beginning to crack, revealing something uglier underneath. You want authentic, Mark? Let's get authentic. Let's talk about your past, shall we? Let's talk about the Mark Wahlberg who wasn't always the family man, the businessman, the Hollywood success story. Let's talk about the real authentic you. The silence that followed was deafening. Wahlberg's face had gone completely stone cold. His eyes locked on Kimmel with an intensity that made everyone in the studio acutely aware that they were witnessing something that had crossed a line from which there might be no return. The cameras kept rolling, but the technical crew was exchanging worried glances, unsure whether they should continue filming or cut to commercial. You really want to go there? Wahlberg asked, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying the weight of a threat. You really want to dig into people's pasts on live television? Because I promise you, Jimmy, that's a game you don't want to play with me. But Kimmel had already committed to his path, and there was no backing down now. The stage was set for a confrontation that would make television history for all the wrong reasons, and everyone in that studio could feel that they were approaching a point of no return that would change everything. Kimmel leaned forward, his veneer of professional courtesy completely evaporating as he prepared to deliver what he clearly believed would be his knockout punch. You know what I find fascinating about your transformation, Mark? How convenient it's been for your career. The whole redemption arc, the family man image, the charitable work. It's almost like it was all carefully calculated by a really good PR team. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and Wahlberg's reaction was immediate and visceral. His entire body tensed, every muscle coiled like a spring ready to explode. The audience could sense the shift in energy. The way the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as two alpha personalities prepared for all-out war. Calculated. Wahlberg's voice was deadly quiet now, the kind of calm that preceded a hurricane. You think my life, my family, my work in the community is all some kind of publicity stunt? You think the last 25 years of my life have been fake? But Kimmel was beyond reason now, intoxicated by his own perceived cleverness and the adrenaline of pushing one of Hollywood's most volatile personalities to the breaking point. I'm just saying, it's remarkable how perfectly everything worked out. How all the rough edges got smoothed away right around the time you started getting serious movie roles. Almost like someone coached you on how to be more palatable. The word palatable hit Wahlberg like a physical blow, and for a moment, the mask of control he'd spent decades perfecting completely slipped. His hands gripped the armrest so tightly his knuckles turned white, and his jaw worked silently as he struggled to contain the rage building inside him like pressure in a boiler about to explode. Palatable, he repeated, his Boston accent becoming more pronounced with each syllable. You want to talk about being palatable, Jimmy? Let's talk about how you built your entire career making jokes about people who couldn't fight back. Let's talk about how you hide behind your desk and your writers and your audience, taking shots at everyone else while pretending to be the good guy. The studio audience was completely silent now, some people actually covering their mouths in shock at what they were witnessing. This had gone far beyond uncomfortable television. This was personal destruction happening in real time, broadcast live to millions of viewers who were getting a front row seat to what felt like a genuine blood feud. Kimmel's face flushed red, his carefully constructed public persona cracking under the pressure of Wahlberg's counterattack. At least I'm honest about what I do, Mark. I don't pretend to be something I'm not. I don't wrap myself in false piety and expect everyone to forget who I really am. That was the line that couldn't be uncrossed, the moment when whatever professional courtesy had existed between them died completely. Wahlberg slowly rose from his chair, his 6-foot frame towering over the seated host, and the entire studio collectively held its breath. False piety? His voice was now a low growl that seemed to reverberate through the entire studio. You want to talk about who I really am? I've never hidden from my past, Jimmy. I've owned every mistake, paid for every stupid thing I did as a kid. But you? You sit behind that desk every night judging everyone else while pretending your hands are clean. Kimmel shot to his feet as well, clearly feeling threatened by Wahlberg's physical presence, but too committed to his attack to back down now. Don't you dare try to flip this around on me. This isn't about me. This is about you and your carefully crafted image that's built on selective memory and convenient omissions. The confrontation had reached a fever pitch, both men now standing, facing each other across the desk like gunfighters in an old western. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of what was rapidly becoming the most explosive late-night television moment in decades. Security personnel were moving closer to the stage, ready to intervene if things turned physical. Selective memory. Wahlberg's laugh was harsh and bitter. You want to talk about selective memory? How about we talk about all the times you've crossed lines with your guests? All the times you've ambushed people with personal attacks disguised as comedy? How about we talk about the real Jimmy Kimmel, not the sanitized version you present to your audience? The accusation struck home, and Kimmel's face contorted with genuine anger. You don't know anything about me or what I've been through. You don't get to come on my show and lecture me about professionalism when your entire career has been built on violence and controversy. Violence and controversy. Wahlberg stepped closer to the desk, his presence now genuinely intimidating. At least I've been honest about my mistakes. At least I've done the work to become a better person. What have you done except hide behind jokes and think that makes you untouchable? The studio was in complete chaos now. Audience members were looking around nervously, some starting to get up from their seats. The band members had abandoned their instruments and were watching in fascination and horror. Production assistants were speaking frantically into their headsets, clearly receiving instructions about whether to cut the feed or let this unprecedented moment continue. Kimmel's voice rose to match Wahlberg's intensity. You want to know what? I think you're exactly the same person you always were, just with better publicity. I think all this reformed family man stuff is an act, and deep down, you're still that angry kid from Boston who solves problems with his fists. The insult was designed to provoke exactly the reaction it got. Wahlberg's face went completely dark, his eyes narrowing to dangerous slits as he processed what Kimmel had just said. The silence that followed was so complete you could hear the air conditioning humming in the background. You know what, Jimmy? Wahlberg's voice was now barely controlled fury. You just made the biggest mistake of your pathetic career. You want to see the old Mark Wahlberg? Keep pushing me. Keep running your mouth and see what happens when you finally push someone who doesn't have to sit here and take your garbage. But something had broken inside Kimmel, some combination of ego and spite that made him incapable of recognizing when he'd gone too far. Instead of backing down, he doubled down with vicious precision. Oh, please, Kimmel sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. Save the tough guy act for someone who's impressed by it. We all know you're just a high school dropout who got lucky. Without the cameras and the handlers, you're nothing but a washed-up has-been desperately clinging to relevance. The words hit their target with devastating accuracy, and something fundamental shifted in Wahlberg's demeanor. The controlled anger that had been simmering beneath the surface exploded into white-hot rage. His face flushed crimson, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, and when he spoke, his voice carried the full weight of decades of suppressed fury. A has-been. Wahlberg's laugh was harsh and humorless, coming from someone whose biggest claim to fame is being the poor man's Carson. You've been riding the same tired formula for 20 years, Jimmy. The same jokes, the same fake sincerity, the same coward's approach to comedy. At least when I was young and stupid, I owned it. You're 56 years old and still acting like a schoolyard bully. Kimmel's face went white, then red, the accuracy of the attack clearly hitting home. Don't you dare lecture me about bullying, you hypocrite. Everyone knows what you were like back in the day. Everyone knows the real story behind your so-called transformation. The real story. Wahlberg stepped around the desk now, closing the distance between them with predatory intent. You want the real story? Here's the real story. I was a punk kid who made terrible mistakes and spent the rest of my life trying to make up for them. But you? You never grew up. You never learned. You just found a way to get paid for being the same nasty little kid. You always were. The studio was in complete pandemonium now. Security guards were moving toward the stage. Audience members were on their feet, some heading for the exits, and the production crew was frantically trying to decide whether to cut the live feed. But nobody could look away from the carnage unfolding before their eyes. Kimmel backed away slightly, but his mouth kept running, driven by some self-destructive impulse he couldn't control. At least I never had to reinvent myself to become acceptable to society. At least I never had to spend decades apologizing for who I really am. That was the final straw. Wahlberg's control snapped completely, and he moved toward Kimmel with the fluid grace of a man who'd never forgotten how to handle himself in a confrontation. Apologizing? You think I've been apologizing? I've been evolving, Jimmy. I've been growing. I've been becoming a better man every single day for 25 years. But you? You're exactly the same petty, vindictive little man you were when you started, except now you hide behind a suit and a network contract. Kimmel's back was literally against the wall now, the reality of his situation finally penetrating through. His rage-induced haze. "Stay away from me," he stammered, his earlier bravado evaporating as he realized he'd pushed too far with the wrong person. Or what? Wahlberg's voice was deadly calm now, more frightening in its control than it had been. In its fury. "You'll make jokes about me? You'll hide behind your writers and your producers? You'll cry to your network about how the big bad movie star was mean to you?" The confrontation had reached its absolute peak, both men breathing heavily, the air between them crackling with barely contained violence. Security was now moving in from both sides of the stage, but Wahlberg raised his hand to stop them, his eyes never leaving Kimmel's face. "You know what the difference is between us, Jimmy?" Wahlberg's voice carried through the silent studio like a funeral bell. "When I was young and angry and stupid, I hurt people, and I've spent every day since then trying to make amends. But you? You hurt people for entertainment, and you call it comedy. You destroy people for applause, and you sleep soundly at night. Because you tell yourself it's just business." Kimmel tried to respond, but no words came. The truth of Wahlberg's accusations had stripped away every defense, every justification, every clever comeback he might have had. He stood there exposed and humiliated in front of his own audience, on his own show. "I came here tonight to promote a movie and have a good time," Wahlberg continued, his voice now carrying a finality that everyone in the studio could feel. "I came here with respect for you and your show. But you decided to make it personal. You decided to attack my character, my family, my life's work. So let me make something very clear to everyone watching." He turned to face the cameras directly, addressing the millions of viewers who were witnessing this unprecedented meltdown. This is who Jimmy Kimmel really is when the cameras are rolling and he thinks he can get away with it. This is the man who hides behind jokes and thinks that gives him the right to destroy people. This is your late-night hero. The silence in the studio was deafening. Kimmel stood frozen, his face a mask of shock and humiliation, unable to process what had just happened to him. His own audience sat in stunned silence, many of them clearly seeing their host in a completely different light. Wahlberg straightened his jacket with deliberate precision, his movements calm and controlled now that he'd said everything he needed to say. "I'm done here," he announced, his voice carrying clearly through the studio. "Jimmy, I hope you got what you were looking for tonight. I hope it was worth it." He turned and began walking toward the stage exit, his steps measured and dignified. Despite the chaos he was leaving behind, the audience watched in absolute silence as one of Hollywood's biggest stars made his exit, not in anger now, but with the quiet dignity of a man who had said everything that needed to be said. "Mark, wait." Kimmel finally found his voice, but it came out as a pathetic croak. "Don't. We can talk about this." Wahlberg paused at the edge of the stage, turning back one final time. "No, Jimmy. We're done talking. You made your choice tonight. You chose to be small and petty and cruel, and now you get to live with the consequences." With that, he walked off the stage and disappeared into the wings, leaving behind a studio full of shocked faces and a host who finally understood that he had just committed career suicide on live television. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of Kimmel's humiliation as he stood alone behind his desk, facing an audience that would never look at him the same way again. The confrontation was over, but everyone in that studio knew they had just witnessed something that would be talked about for years to come. This wasn't just a celebrity feud or a late-night controversy. This was the moment when one man's cruelty finally met its match, and the reckoning was absolute and devastating.